Hello, people. First of all, I would like to say thank you to those who watched and subscribed and commented on my first video. I really appreciate it. And I've been feeling very, very welcomed. So thank you. I was thinking about showing the books I've read over the last few months, but then I realized it would be too big of a pile, and instead I decided to make a top 10 of my readings through this year. And um, keep in mind, I don't read single issues. I read trades and hardcovers, so there is nothing really recent in this list. The only criteria I followed was choosing books I had never read before and that I did read this year. From these 10 books, 8 of them are in Portuguese. There's only 2 American editions, and let's start with those. So we have Frank Miller's Ronin. Yes, I've never read it before. And Jeff Loeb's Tim Sale's Batman The Long Halloween. So, Frank Miller's Ronin. These 2 books have been in my shelves at least since 2008, maybe 2009, and I never felt ready for them before. I'm like this in many things. I don't mind waiting until I feel I am in the right mood to enjoy things. And this was the case with these books. And well, there's so many things to read, so little time. I don't bother with immediately reading many of the things I buy. But Ronin became, I think, my favorite Frank Miller's work, maybe on par with his Daredevil run. And I actually like Miller's writing in this book and plotting even more than his art. I feel the art is a little bit rushed in some moments, and that Miller relies maybe too much in Lynn Varley's colors, but it is an absolutely magnificent book. And if you consider it was done in the very early 80s, it was certainly very, very groundbreaking. Lovely. Batman The Long Halloween was also a very good read. I do think Tim Sales is one of the best modern age artists. Very, very special style. And Jeff Loeb's writing is not bad at all in this The Long Halloween. So it's a very engaging Batman story. Then, a book I love, Mort Cinder, by Argentinian authors Hector Oysterheld and Alberto Brescia. Oysterheld was one of the most important Argentinian writers and very political engaged. He was imprisoned by the right-wing Argentinian regime in the mid-70s, and no one has ever heard of him again. So he almost surely died or was killed while in prison. But Alberto Brescia, the artist, is one of the true genius of comics of all times. His use of black and white is absolutely unparalleled. His characters in this book, which is very dark really feel tormented and frightened and disturbed. And this is really a delightful book. The character Mort Cinder is a immortal, or at least he resurrects every time he dies. So he has had a very long life. He was a slave building the pyramids. He was one of the 300 Spartans at the Thermopylae, and Brescia is probably very influential of Frank Miller, not only in Sin City because of Brescia's use of black and white, but also probably in the 300 story. I will probably make a video someday just about this book, as I will probably will, or I will surely will, about Sergio Toppi's Sharazde. Toppi is an Italian artist, and Sharazde is, and I'm pretty much confident saying this, one of the most beautiful art pieces I have ever seen. It is an adaptation of the 1001 Arabian Nights. It's a group of short stories, most of them in black and white, but also a few of them in color. And it was started in 1979, then it kept Toppis kept producing these stories in the early 80s, and he made 3 more stories in 2005, and they are all collected in this book. And I know there is an American edition of this with a preface by Walt Simonson. You probably can find that, and it's just absolutely amazing. Brilliant, brilliant art. This is probably one of my top 3 books of all time. It's beautiful. Another European album. This one, I know it is published in English, and some of you also enjoy it, I'm sure. It's Blacksad, Amarillo. It's the 5th book of the series by Spanish artists Juan Diaz Canales and Juanjo Guarnido. And I really enjoy Blacksad. And every of the 5 albums is very good. I highly recommend it if you still haven't read the stories of this private detective in the 1950s USA. Then I read New Teen Titans, The Judas Contract. When I was growing up, I was mostly a Marvel fan, but one of the few titles from DC I used to follow was indeed New Teen Titans, but I never got to the Judas Contract part, and I now had a very good time reading this. It's by Marv Wolfman, George Perez, very well written, wonderful George Perez art, and I think it aged very, very well. I also read or reread the Dark Phoenix saga. I've read it many, many times over my youth. But the Dark Phoenix saga now feels a little boring just because of the way Marvel books used to be written, with constant reminders to the reader of who the characters were and what had happened in the previous issues. And with New Teen Titans, that doesn't happen, which is good. Then one of my favorite ongoing series, and who doesn't love Saga? This is volume 5. I'm waiting for volume 6 anytime now. Lovely stuff. Then I wanted to pick a Marvel book in this top 10 list. And although I've read quite a few Marvel books, I had some trouble picking one. And I decided going with Savage Wolverine by Frank Cho. I really enjoy Frank Cho's art. It has almost a European ligne claire, clear line style. It is somewhat simple, with not many shadows and vibrant colors. And I had a good time reading this book. It was, I remember finding it very fun and easy to read, and I really enjoyed it. Then we have Harrow County, Volume 1. This was published in Portugal just a couple of months ago, and I absolutely loved it. I'm really looking forward for the next volumes. The story is very cool, and the art is absolutely brilliant. And by the way, Tyler Crook, the artist, has a YouTube channel, and he doesn't. Not many people are subscribed to it, and you really should check it out. Tyler Crook shows some work in progress in his channel, and it's very interesting to see him work. And finally, and this time I'm cheating a bit because this is what I'm reading right now, and I'm going only about half of it. It's Miracle Man, the entire Alan Moore's run, and it's lovely. Moore's writing is not as sharp as it later becomes, but if you consider when this book was written, it is certainly groundbreaking, and it defines the way superhero stories were told ever since. And there are some very nice artists working in Miracle Man. Highly recommended. I will try to finish it before the New Year's Eve. So this was my top 10 list for 2016, but I also have 3 books which I've read this year, and don't misunderstand me. I don't think they are bad books. They just disappointed me a bit, at least comparing to the hype around them. One of them is kind of an oldie. It was published in Portugal recently. It's Jessica Jones, Alias, Volume 1, which I didn't care much about. Too much dialogue and too little anything else. It's mainly talking heads, and I just don't feel very engaged in a comic like this. Volume 2 is on the bookstores for sale, but I still haven't picked it up, and I don't know if I will. Then there's Sex Criminals, Volume 1, which I also don't feel it is my cup of tea. The premise on the story, the time stopping orgasms, is very cool, but the theme for someone used to European comics is not fresh at all. In European comics, we have Milo Manara and Guido Crepax and Sarpieri and many others doing books on sex and in a erotical and sometimes, many times, in a pornographical way. So sex is not a new genre for a European reader, and I actually don't like the way Matt Fraction tells the story. I don't like the constant flashbacks. I don't especially sympathize with the characters. I find the Sex Police very distasteful looking, and Zdarsky's art is also not much to my liking. The only thing I like in this book is the coloring effects when time is stopped. I think that was a perfect solution, but not really my cup of tea. And finally, a book I was a bit disappointed with, not with the entire series. Some of you will feel this as almost sacrilege, but I was not really engaged with Fatal. I still have a lot of stuff to read from Brubaker and Phillips. I've really enjoyed Criminals, and I am really looking forward to buy what's the name of it? The Fade Out. I'm really looking forward for the Fade Out. It should be right up my alley. But I was a bit annoyed with Fatal, and especially because of just a couple of panels. You know, when you have a special interest in some other thing and it is not well portrayed in comics. Well, I'm an heavy smoker. I smoke cigarettes, but I also smoke pipes, tobacco pipes, and the occasional cigar. And I felt a bit pet peeved about one Fatal story which is supposedly happening in the 12th or 13th century, and there's a guy smoking a pipe, and well, tobacco was only introduced in Europe, and this is in France. Tobacco was only introduced in Europe from the Americas, and wooden pipes didn't even exist until the late 18th century. Before, tobacco was smoked in clay pipes or was sniffed in snuff form, which is ground tobacco. And seeing a character in the 12th century in France smoking a pipe made me a bit angry with Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips. But that's just a pet peeve of mine. Well, thank you for watching. Mind the comics. I'll see you next time. Cheers.